Hello, everyone. How are you guys enjoying day 2 so far? Y'all ready for Worlds Collide tonight? All right, so this
Go
is...
China!
Yeah. This is the ship and module balance presentation. I'm CCP Fozzie.
I'm CCP Rice.
I'm CCP Sharq.
And we're going to talk about a couple things today around ships and modules and fun stuff like that, and then a special fitting discussion. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about what we ended last year's presentation with, module tier aside, where we have been going over the last year, what we've been learning from talking to you guys, and where we're going in the very immediate next steps. Looking back on the year a little bit, what's happened since last Fanfest, and how some of that's worked out. Some of the stuff that's coming in Scylla in, what is it now, like 3 days on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. A little discussion on large ships and their place in EVE and the way they fit into our general balancing philosophy and what's coming up over the next couple of years for that, or in the next couple of months in a lot of cases. Discussion on tactical destroyers. We're going to talk a little bit about the 2 that we've introduced so far, how they're doing, and then show you guys some special preliminary bonuses for the next 2, the final 2 tactical destroyers. Mm-hmm. They're pretty overpowered. It's great.
Yeah, but then you have the job to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we're going to go through some really awesome stuff that you guys got a glimpse of in the keynote, some of what we are working on behind the scenes to improve ship fitting in EVE. And then, assuming we have time for it, we'll have question and answer time. There's microphones on either side, so as we get towards the end, if we still have time before basically the end of the hour, we'll try to do some questions. If you don't have we don't have time to answer all the questions here, there's 2 round tables as well. So both of those will be happening tomorrow. You guys can ask us lots and lots of questions there. So this is the team that's most heavily involved with balance in the game. I wanted to introduce these people to you. I just realized, actually, even though Sharq's in the presentation, you're not actually on this. He does much work on the balance itself as on the tools that allow you guys to use the balance, the wonderful UI and all that. But this is the group of people that is most commonly making changes to the balance. You can blame us for everything that gets nerfed, for the most part.
Usually just me, though.
Yeah. So this is an image that I showed all of you guys last year towards the end of the balancing presentation about the dream of module tier aside, getting modules into a place where they all fit into roles, where there is actual appropriate balance between the different modules in the same type. And we use the example of a beam laser here and use this to lay out what we wanted to get to. Over the last year, we've rebalanced quite a lot of different sets of modules in this, most of them fairly simple sets to kind of get ourselves warmed up, but we're going to be moving into more and more complicated stuff in the future. So in year 1, we had co-processors, reactor controls, and micro-auxiliaries, like missile launchers, capacitor flux coils, and many, many more. There we go. So at this point now, the basic process of module tier aside has been established. We've found that we are able to basically hit some of what we were aiming for, make the progression of modules much more intuitive, create better balance between the different tiers of modules. Thanks to your feedback, we have a much better naming system than we did at the beginning. We've tried a number of different ways of naming. We've talked to you guys a lot, got a ton of feedback from you about how we should be naming modules. The end result is a system that combines descriptive names, like compact for lower fitting, with some of the flavor names that you guys know and love, like Arbalest. And combine them together so that you can search for both. We got kind of the best of both worlds. And that's something that only is possible because you guys provided such great feedback on the forums. Especially CCP Terminus has spent a lot of time over the last year looking at your guys' feedback on module balance. And big, big thank you to everyone who's been involved with that. One thing that we've learned over the last year is that because there's a certain amount of server effort required in changing one module to another, because you have to search over every item in the entire game to see whether it is a caps flux coil or not. you end up with longer downtimes for module tier-side releases, which is why, although we are releasing much more often, we're doing the 5-week releases, you're going to be seeing in the future, it's kind of the same pattern you've been seeing so far, module tier-side tend to be clumped together. We'll tend to try to do a bunch at once, rather than trying to spread it out through every release, so that we can keep the downtime as short as possible, especially for our Australian friends. And keeping the release downtimes as short as possible is a big goal. So that's one of the things we've kind of learned as we've gone through this first year together. And now we're continuing on to a set of more complex module groups. We have decided what our next kind of 4 sets of modules we're hitting are, and these are some fairly impactful ones. So we're going to let you know what those are now. These are coming up, no set release date yet, but very soon. And they're micro warp drives, afterburners, shield extenders, and armor plates. So these are our next 4 targets for module tier-side. And we're going to be talking to you guys more in the upcoming weeks and months about all the details of that. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on over the last year since we did this presentation last year with that wonderful, wonderful background there. We made some very big changes to industrial ships, introduced a new ship, the Prospect. The graph you see on the side here is the mining of fullerite, so wormhole gases, by Venture and the Prospect. They are combined, like by far, they dominate all of the gas mining in the game. Some people still try to do it in ferroxes, but by and large, people are mining gas in the Venture the Prospect, and you can see the effects of some of our wormhole changes and changes to Tech 3 composition in the big spike there. But basically, this shows a pretty significant uptake for the Prospect in this role. We're pretty happy with that kind of distribution between Tech 1 and Tech 2 ship. We updated mining barges, changed around a lot of the bonuses there. Blockade runners, big changes to deep space transports, and they're going to be getting even more capabilities when we allow them to launch and deploy structures out of the fleet hangars coming up in April, and allow them to deploy iHubs directly. And we added low slots to freighters, which we announced last year as rigs to freighters. I'm sure many of you guys remember this, the process we went through with this. Again, I want to give huge thanks to everyone who provided constructive feedback during this process. We ended up with a much better system than we started with. And that's what comes out of the kind of feedback process that we have with you guys. Combined, we make much better changes than we ever would be able to make without your help. We also made a big series of module and other changes in Kronos, upgrades to Citadel missiles at this point, which has firmly put the Revelation into the spot of least used Dread, so we're working on that. But at least improved the life for Citadel missile users a lot. Combat drone rebalance, you see the picture there describing the way we've set up the different drone groups. This has worked out very well for the AMR drones, as I'm sure you guys have probably noticed. Less well for the Caldari drones. The usage of them is still quite low. So this is something that we will be continuing to revisit, but overall progress, but there's still more work to do. Introduced the medium micro jump drive, one of my personal favorite modules. It's a whole lot of fun on low-sec battlecruisers. Warp speed modules. Hull tanking rigs, you're going to be seeing some new possible utilities for those a little later in this presentation. And buffs to Nosferatu. We also made a bunch of big changes in Phoebe, most notably power projection changes, changed the landscape for capital ships and for subcaps traveling through teleportation quite a lot. Heavy interdictor rebalance. You're going to be seeing, I think, some pretty cool examples of what heavy interdictors can do in combat at Worlds Collide. The Camel Empire team put some Hictors into their setups that I think are going to work out really well for them. And a first pass on stealth bombers. Now, I know there's still a lot more work to be done with these, but we are committed to working with you guys to get to the point where stealth bombers are in a healthier place. And this was a first pass on it, adjusting the agility, slowing down the bomb speed, and making them more vulnerable to smart bombs, which people have been using to some very good effect to defend themselves. So now I'm going to pass the clicker over to CCP Rise. He's going to talk to you a bit more about some other stuff that happened this last year.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through some of the things that I worked on last year, and I have a couple graphs I feel kind of embarrassed about them after the keynote yesterday because they don't animate or have hearts, but I hope that's okay. So kind of at the same time, I'm going to talk about pirate faction rebalance along with adding Morty's Legion ships because they all kind of fall in the same boat. And a lot of mixed results here, basically. This is a graph of pirate frigate damage for all 7 pirate frigates, including the Astero and the Garmer. And as you can see, we were pretty successful in rescuing the 4 variations that no one ever used ever for anything and getting them at least active. There's clearly still some leaders here, the Worm and Garmer out in the front, if I'm not mistaken. The colors are kind of hard to see, of course. But that's not so surprising, and that's fine. We feel pretty good about this set. Yeah, and then cruisers, kind of we're in the same boat. This is pirate cruiser damage. This is over, like you can see the spike in both graphs. I'm sure you guys figured it out, but where it jumps is where we made the pirate rebalance. So for the cruisers, again, kind of the same result. We had like the Phantasm and Ashimu that were, and one more, the, should look at the color, that wasn't getting used at all, basically. And after the pirate faction rebalance, they're at least all seeing use. I've seen some really cool videos of Ashimu and Phantasm work, actually, which is really fun to see. There's still kind of a pretty big spread here with Orthrus, of course, and Gila pretty far out in front, but overall this is not a terrible result. And one that's not going quite so well is battleships. This is actually only 6. The Macariel's not here. It's the way this graph is made. I can't put the Macariel because it does more damage with smart bombs from people sitting on top of each other, smart bombing with Macariels, that it like would make this entire graph look like a flat line. So sorry about that, but yeah, basically, you know, you can see here in the yellow is a Vindicator. It's gotten a lot more use lately, and in the bright green, the Rattlesnake jumped up quite a bit in PvP activity. Those are both good things, but you can see the rest of the group still struggling a bit. I mean, that includes Barghest. It's fine for Balgorn, obviously. Balgorn's probably in a totally fine place, even though the damage is relatively low. And the favorite ship, the Nestor, of course, still kind of hanging in the area the Nestor hangs in. And yeah, this is Jumps, which looks a little bit different. You see a little more activity here for the Nightmare because of the PvE application. So, and one comment I wanted to make on the Mordu's ships, we get a lot of feedback about Mordu's Legion, particularly the Orthrus and the Garmer being pretty obnoxious. And it's true, they're both extremely good, possibly a bit too good, but I think one thing at least that we have going for us with this line of ships is this phenomenon, which is the 400 mil Garmer getting killed by an Atron. And I've seen quite a bit of this, and I really love it personally. I was going to put a 1.5 bill Orthrus kill from a solo cruiser, but it was actually my character, and I was worried you guys would figure it out. But yeah, this is something we're watching for sure. I know for some folks, this little ship can be pretty frustrating, but we'll keep an eye on it. It's not getting any changes right this second, but it's at least really cool, and it's fun to kill, so it could be worse. And along with pirate faction ships, we made some changes to recon ships. Here you can see total PvP damage for recons by group. So there's force recons and combat recons, and in the blue you can see combat recons spiking way up in total damage, which is really cool. Obviously they were really low before. Both classes went up a bit, which is good. Probably seeing a bit more use across the board for both. And another thing that's kind of interesting, this is actually a graph of recon jumps for all recons, and something that I think would surprise a lot of people. I know when Larrikin first got here and looked at this graph, he was shocked, and I think it's pretty typical. The bright yellow there is a Pilgrim, and you can see basically that the Pilgrim was 3rd most popular recon in the game before the recon changes, which I think people were always thinking that it was like not used ever at all. So this is, again, a bit messy here, but one of the cool things is before there was a really clear distinction between Cloaky Recons and Combat Recons. Cloaky Recons were basically on top. All 4 were above all 4 Combat Recons, and now it's mixed. Now we have like Curse and Lachesis have jumped past the 2 least popular Force Recons, so there's kind of a better mix there. And just while on this topic, I will mention we're still watching the medium plex thing. I know that's a thing still. With these, it's not something, again, that we're changing right this second, but if it gets kind of too oppressive, we'll take a look at that for sure. The last thing that came in last year, or since last Fanfest, is the bowhead. And this was kind of a really cool case of a direct feedback ship, which we don't actually have a history of having a ton of, like an explicit like push by the CSM to put a particular ship in the game. This is an example of that went pretty well. And usage really isn't bad, actually. I looked at it yesterday, and it's getting about a sixth of the use that any of the Tech 1 freighters is, which is probably about right. So that's pretty good, actually. All right, so moving on to what we have coming up. You guys know that I announced recently while holding a bat that we were going to make some changes to a lot of the things that you guys talk to us about very regularly. This was a heavily community-influenced balance pass, both because of your feedback and also because of working with the CSM during the summit. They had a whole lot to say about balance, as they always do, and we focused on kind of some of the most important issues that they raised and tried to make significant changes where we could. So the first big one is, of course, the Ishtar. And the Ishtar is crazy. It, at the moment, anyway, is top 6 for number of jumps made in the last 30 days in EVE Online. And if you're wondering what the other 5 are, this is them. And on top of that, the Ishtar is doing top damage for all ships in EVE for the last 30 days by double the next competitor. It's also doing the most number of people shooting other people. Our Ishtar is by the same, around double. So this ship is popular, and for good reason. There's a lot of really interesting discussion around the best way to tackle this problem, and again, feedback was really valuable. In the end, we did settle on reducing the bonus to sentry damage by 5% per level. We're going to try that. Everyone I've talked to here so far seems at least cautiously optimistic about that change. It may be that it's still extremely popular, but we're at least confident that there'll be a big impact from this, and then we can look at what that impact is. It may be that people switch to another ship. It may be that nothing, it may be that just these fleets aren't quite as effective, even though they're still the most popular thing, but we can reevaluate pretty quickly and see how that goes. So there's that. There is the Tengu and its other Tech 3 friends. This is a really interesting case where we've been saying for a couple years that we really want to do a full Tech 3 balance pass, work on subsystem diversity, just generally make this class more interesting and more fair. But there's a lot of pressure, of course, from you guys, and we totally agree. I put together, actually had Larrikin put together. It's fun to have new people. Some quick examples of, in case you're not familiar, this is a typical fleet Tengu. It pushes 210,000 effective HP before links and has a SIG of around 230 or so. And you can compare that to a Rock, which actually has 10,000 less EHP and 4 times the SIG. And this is why we felt, this is part of why we felt we needed to make an adjustment in the short term to the defensive subsystems and just make sure that there was a little more space for other options when it comes to absorbing damage in fleets. And so we're going to give this a try for now. We still expect to make a full pass on Tech 3 cruisers as soon as we can, just not worth putting this off for any longer for that. We're changing rails. There was a graph in the dev blog you can go look at, but basically rails are just pushing everybody into doctrines that support rails, and that's not in really terrible shape, but a little adjustment here to the rate of fire will probably make a little bit more room for other classes, so reducing that by about 7.5%. And then we get to the more fun ones. So Skynet, if you're not familiar, is delegated fighters from the safety of a POS, doing tons of damage, like 3,000 DPS or whatever from one carrier, using all of its drone link augmenters and tracking is crazy on them, and interceptors are hard to kill. So this is pretty bad news just from a game design standpoint. So we feel pretty good about removing this. We're going to get rid of delegating. We asked you guys if you wanted us to leave warp in. We're going to do that. So fighters can still warp. Yeah, that's coming in 2 days, so no more Skynet. And I'm going to touch on this again in just a second, but the most interesting part of this blog for me was this section. I don't know if you guys saw, but I included a section at the end talking about the state of battleships and battlecruisers, which is one of the most common topics at the moment in the EVE community, as far as I can tell, and tried to make the case in this blog that things aren't so bad, that they aren't as bad as they feel. You can see here, this is a graph of total damage by ship class. So you have cruiser on top, hack second, battleship, then strategic cruiser, little ways down, combat battlecruiser. And if you just look at this in terms of how the system kind of is balanced, this isn't necessarily a bad place. We actually can look at battleships over time, and the damage that they have done total on the server hasn't gone down really hardly at all to other ships in the last 2 or 3 years. So even though it feels like things have changed a lot, and they have, from our perspective, from a data perspective, it's hard to see where the change is. And so we felt pretty comfortable with where things are. And the other thing that happened as a result of this blog, along with people completely disagreeing with this conclusion and voicing that pretty heavily, was despite the fact that people generally hate this, people seemed very frustrated with taking something else away from capitals. This sort of poked at the problem that we have currently with the state of caps and super caps. And all of that, put together, all of this feedback from the blog, pushed me into an emotional state of reflection. I got a lot of personal mails and people turning the graph into different graphs, basically saying, you know, at the top of this, like the first quote is a quote from me on the 07 show saying battleships are still used as much as they used to be, and him, you know, the person sending the mail saying that's completely incorrect, and which is really interesting. In fact, it is mostly correct, at least by a lot of the metrics we use, but the important thing that this caused me to do is look at the difference between how you guys feel about how ships are and how they are being used, and how they feel is really important. So how we've been doing balance, just talk about tier side a little bit to go back a couple years, is firstly to fix a whole bunch of inconsistency in the skill requirements for ships. And secondly, basically to rescue a whole bunch of really garbage ships that didn't do anything because of the tier system. And so to go back to one of the slides from earlier, this pirate frigate damage chart's a good example of tier side kind of as it was originally imagined. We have 3 ships in a class that are good, and 4 ships that are really bad. In this case, it's not actually because they had less slots in every case, like it was with Tech 1 cruisers or Tech 1 frigates. But the point is to go through, look at each of these classes, and try to at least make sure there's room for each thing in the class. The problem with that is it can leave the big picture out just a little bit. We can kind of lose, maybe lose some sight of the position of each of the classes relative to each other because we're more in the details of how the class is doing within itself. And so based on that, based on this big push of feedback off of this dev blog, we've been starting a very serious internal discussion about trying to figure out where we want these ships to be in the game. And over the next couple months, we're putting together a group that's going to begin just digging heavily into the state of big ships in EVE. We really want them to feel awesome. We want the investment that you make to feel worthwhile. We want you to feel powerful and cool. And we don't know how that exactly happens, but it's important for us to go take a look and try to do the best we can. And this gets even more important with the SOV changes coming. So that's kind of the future for me coming after Scylla. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to CCB Fozzie.
That is a very pretty screenshot. And this is a very pretty picture, too. So let's talk a little bit about tactical destroyers. We've released 2 of them so far. I'm sure you guys may have noticed them flying around a little bit, once in a while. This is the Confessor. For anyone who isn't aware, the order that these ships are released in is tied to an in-game event we ran, where people could support their own factions in helping them research. So Amar won, got themselves the Confessor first. Minmatar came second. And that's why the Svipul, somewhere CSP Puncturus is like tisk in my pronunciation. Came second. And these ships have been a very interesting experience so far. The goal behind them was to create some really new, exciting gameplay opportunities through a mechanic that we've never had in EVE before, the ability to essentially change the stats of your ship, the bonuses of the ship on the fly, to be able to choose between different options. The goal, of course, is to make it so that these ships feel fun because of that mechanic, but that they're not too overpowered just kind of on their base stats, which we partly hit, partly didn't. But it's something that we've learned a lot from and I think is a really good step. The Sveeple especially has been an interesting experience. This one is one that the overwhelming response on the forums to the stats was that it would be crazy underpowered and that it was going to be terrible and no one would use it. And obviously that actually was not the case. This is a chart of the 4 most popular destroyer-sized ships in the game by jumps. You're going to see the spike there, the one that's right up the top. That's the Sveeple, and it is now the most popular by jumps per day destroyer-sized ship in the game. Then Thrasher and Algos, which provide good context because I think most people are pretty familiar with how good the Thrasher and Algos are and how popular they are. And then the Confessor after that. Overall, these things showing up there isn't too bad. We'd probably prefer there'd be a bit more of a advantage in like total usage for the much cheaper, much more accessible Tech 1 versions versus Tech 3, but that's something we're going to be working with over the next couple of releases. We are committed to making sure that these ships are balanced, which is going to mean probably some changes to them over time. But in the meantime, we also have some new tactical destroyers out. And those will be coming up pretty soon. So we have 2 more, the last 2 factions in the research race. Caldari came 3rd, so they'll be coming next. And then Galente came 4th, so they will be trailing at the end. Caldari is scheduled for June at this point, for our June release, and Galente is scheduled for July. Of course, this is open to change, but this is the current schedule. We're working with the guys in art. They need the time to make some really awesome stuff. We're going to be showing the art for both of these ships at the art and graphics panel tomorrow in this room. So we're going to be hiding them for now. You're going to have to wait for that panel to see how they look, but yeah, and they're not on the slide, so it doesn't matter how much you chant, I'm not going to be able to show them. But they look really cool. Especially, the Galente one is kind of weird and awesome in so many ways. It looks like no other ship we've ever had in the game. But that's probably enough teasing for that. And that's, yeah, tomorrow at noon in Tranquility. Might be a bit early for people that are on the really good pub crawl groups like mine, but you guys should definitely still try to make it. Yeah. Now, I'm about to show you the preliminary bonuses for these 2 ships, so you get an idea. I've been asked a bunch, probably one of the most common questions I've been asked so far this Fanfest is what weapon systems these 2 ships are going to be using. So we are going to reveal that here. We're going to reveal some preliminary bonuses. I want to be clear, these are preliminary. There's, especially on the Galente one, probably a little bit of a problem with overpoweredness in the stats that are up there. But we're going to be working with you guys to make sure we get good balance with them. But first, I'm going to introduce you to the next fleet off of the assembly lines of the Caldari state, the Jackdaw, which is a missile destroyer. So
read really fast and clap.
a lot of text on the screen, but just the key things. Uses missiles, does less peak damage than a flycatcher, but does it without any specific damage type, so you have more flexibility than a flycatcher. A ginormous 6 mid slots, only 2 low slots. This, in a lot of ways, is a ship where we're trying to make it very extreme. Extreme advantages, extreme disadvantages. In some ways that most readers have never had a ship quite like this before. So beyond just being a destroyer with 6 mid slots and 2 low slots, it also has the propulsion mode bonuses reversed from what you saw in the Confessor. So instead of giving the big 66% bonus to speed and the 33% bonus to agility, this guy gets a 33% bonus to speed and a 66% bonus to agility. Because that's division, it's huge. It means that this is going to be the slowest of the tactical destroyers by quite a large margin. It's the slowest base, and it also doesn't get a bigger speed boost, which is going to help keep it a little bit under control with light missiles. But the difference, the amount of agility you can get out out of this thing is insane. With the stats we've currently got in testing on it, when you're not in propulsion mode, you turn like an unplated mauler. When you are in propulsion mode, you turn like an interceptor with an inertial stab. That is going to be, I think, a very interesting choice for people to play with as they switch this on and off. But of course, all this is very open to feedback as we go forward. Next, I'm going to introduce you to the Galente Tech 3 destroyer, named after the Greek goddess in triplicate of crossroads, Hecate. So this is a hybrid ship. We're not making a drone Tech 3 destroyer. That would be kind of broken. Yeah. And it also is the first ever hull resistance bonus chip. So yes, the key highlights of this guy, hybrid turret tracking on the base destroyer, hybrid turret optimal on the sharpshooter mode, propulsion mode that's based around micro-warp drives in the proud Galente tradition, and very strong defensive bonuses that apply both to armor and hull. And kind of the same way this Fapel applies it to both armor and shield, Galente get a pretty big buffer out of this. So these are ships that we're really excited to keep talking to you guys about. We're probably going to start making some forum posts with the full stats of them, so you guys can start giving us some feedback on those over the upcoming weeks, especially of the Jackdaw, because that one's coming first. And again, the art for them will be shown at the art panel tomorrow. So we really look forward to getting these guys out into your hands. Now, finally, is the last section we have to present. We're going to be showing you a bit more about something that we talked about at the keynote, and that we're really excited, even though it's not kind of production ready yet. It's still just kind of a prototype, but it's a really awesome prototype. And that is changes to the fitting experience. So Eve's fitting is absolutely core to everything you do in the game. It's one of the kind of most universal activities in Eve. We have a lot of really amazing third-party tools that help with fitting. Guys like EFT, PIFA, Osmium, all really awesome for creating fits, for sharing fits, for tweaking fits. But we want to be able to do better things in the client as well. I think there's a proud tradition of CCP stealing good ideas from our third-party devs. Homages to our third-party devs, politely. And we really want to use some of the experience from those to create a better fitting experience in. So this is, I'm going to bring out, well, he's already here, CCP Sharq. And we're going to walk you through a little bit about what's on the screen here.
Yeah, hi. To give you a bit of a backstory on the project, this is basically a pet project of mine and CCP Toxforge, and we've been working towards this for a couple of years now. CCP Karkur basically overtook it from Toxforge because he's quite busy now as the technical director of EVE Online. So in a couple of Friday afternoons, we puzzled this together, and a lot of Karkur's free time. So we're not replacing those third-party tools. We're basically trying to make your life a bit easier. I myself play a bit. I'm a bit of a care bear, and I like to min-max my fits. And having to undock to see what my hardness do is pretty terrible. So we're fixing that. So basically, in the big fitting circle, you can actually activate your modules, and you can overload them, and you can see the changes in the numbers in the stats panel. On the left-hand side, there's a new panel where you can browse your saved fittings along with every ship in the game. And sorry? And your modules, yeah? So you can go between your fittings and your ships, or just ships within the client and the modules, and you can drag from there into the screen or double-click on the module to fit it. Below that, the module list, there is the ammunition that fits into the fitted modules, so you can add them from there. So it's pretty straightforward. The other thing we added is the drone panel, which has drone information now, which was completely missing. So I hope you guys find that helpful. Mm-hmm. But the overall layout and all of this is just a test. This is just us concepting and getting this technically feasible, and trying it out, and basically it's theory crafting, more or less, but theory crafting in client.
Yeah, this screenshot is of an actual client prototype that does work. Like you can overload all the modules, you can fit anything. This allows you to create fits for ships that you don't own, so you can try out, see what I could do if I bought a Stabber fleet issue. You could see what would happen if I switched my Golem's booster to a Dead Space 1, what would my tank be? All these things that right now require third-party tools. With this, you'd be able to do it in the client. You'd be able to much more easily manipulate shared fitting. If you've got a friend who's got a fitting, and maybe it's something you've seen on a kill board that you really like, but you want to tweak it for your own purposes, see what would fit in the CPU left. One of the other really cool features of this, something that I've missed for a long time, some of these tools, this also has the ability to say, show me what can fit with the remaining CPU and power grid I have left on this ship.
Yeah. So basically that's a feature we haven't implemented yet, but yeah.
There's buttons for it though.
You can do it through the filters on top. You see the slot filters and the power grid and the CPU and the skill book in the far right. But we're thinking about if you fitted the ship and you have one low slot left, you can click that low slot. It would filter by the power grid and the CPU and the low slot and give you the modules, possibly just overdrives, that you can fit in there.
Yeah, and so this is, of course, only one of many things we'd like to do in the future to update fitting in Eve. There's a whole lot that can be done to improve it. There's a whole lot we can steal from third parties. I mean, the dream would be to just like steal all of Osmium and like take the sharing features and all that kind of stuff in as well. But one step at a time.
Yeah, you're gonna have to be able to fit at work and at school as well. So you need those third-party tools.
Yeah, we'll never replace third-party tools. We just create a much better experience for people that are fitting in the client. And not everyone is going to have the access to those third-party tools as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, this is something, like we said, that is, we don't have a set release date for it. We don't even have it's not officially, like, for sure, but it's a prototype that we really want to show off. It could take the form of a beta feature or something like that, and we'll see kind of where it goes from there. Definitely come and talk to us if there's things you would really like to see in this. Talk to Sharq or Karkur, and let them know what you like about this, what you'd really like to see in fitting in Eve, and I'm sure they're excited to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, so now we've got some time for questions. Yeah, we've got quite a bit of time for questions. So we've got microphones on the sides. People can go ahead and line up. We also, because we know there's always going to be tons of questions about ships and modules, we've got 2 round tables, both of them tomorrow. One at 11 o'clock in the MR room, and then one at 1600, 4 o'clock in Jeddah. So let us know what you think about the change we've been making. Let us know what else you'd like to see, and come to those roundtables. All right, so we'll kind of alternate back and forth between the 2 sides. Why don't you go ahead and start?
Yes, the ghost fitting's looking very exciting. So small request, can you then also increase the amount of fittings you can save? Because 100 doesn't really cut it, and I really have to find out where I have to delete which fittings I can delete. Yep.
All right, so the question was, can we increase the number of saved fitting slots?
That's a very technical question.
That is it's a good question, but it's one that depends on like storage, all that.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I'm not. We will ask, I guess, we'll ask some of the engineers. Yeah, Karkur could answer that, Mastermind could answer that. We'll try to find out for you, but very good idea, yes. Yes?
I have a question based on the tier side of the modules. On the last set of all the stuff, you've taken the tier 4, which was mainly used because of its low fitting requirements, and made it not the compact. So now we've all had to go back and go, oh, well, now we need to go buy the compact and get rid of what used to be the tier 4. So what was the reasoning behind that, and why, can we get the future ones to the tier 4 be the compact?
Yep. It kind of depends on the context of the module. So we're trying to make choices based on a bunch of different things for each module group. Which ones in particular are you concerned about in this case?
Nothing really comes to mind right now, but most of the ones that I've had It's just, oh, now I have to go and buy all the compacts instead of having to restrain.
I mean,
we turned the Arbalest launchers into compacts. What else did we? What ones didn't we turn into the?
I know
definitely
the inertias are not the.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the PDUs to restrain. Yeah, I mean that's something we'll definitely keep in mind. It's a good point. In a lot of cases, we should be trying to hit. Make as much as possible the modules map into what people would have been using them for in the first place.
I've got a bunch of stacks of modules I am trying to sell right now.
And we'll try to. We're going to do our best to try to avoid those kind of conflicts in the future. Let us know if you see us basically any of our plans not matching up with your expectations in that on the forums, and we'll do our best to keep them in mind. Yes.
Yeah. Hi guys. Well, I'm playing EVE since the release, and I'm not happy about the things you're doing with Skynet, because I just thinking about what happens within the last half year, so you took Skynet away.
Yeah.
Because the thing you told in your presentation about the 3K DPS you doing with 10 or something else, it's nothing that changed within the last month. So.
I know. It's. I actually think it's interesting that like the increase in popularity, even though there wasn't. I mean, there has been some changes, the accumulated changes to drone modules and stuff, but it's been slow, and suddenly it became a really popular thing. It's something that at any point when it would have become popular, we would have, and it, maybe even something if we would have made it now, we just wouldn't want to make it this way. It breaks a couple rules. The risk versus reward kind of balance for it is very out of whack. You're safer than we would want you to be for the amount of power you're wielding, and then it also it's part of a whole group of things that we're trying to whittle away at when we can, which is like inactive piloting. It's the same reason that we don't like off-grid links, that the carrier pilot actually isn't really doing anything, so it's kind of an alt role, and we want to avoid that. But I totally hear the frustration that if you're someone who's using this and someone who wants to fly capitals and use capitals, that you want them to be strong and you want there to be good reason to, and that this is kind of a bummer for someone who's using it. And that's kind of what I'm saying in the presentation. I want to look into, rather than trying to preserve this mechanic that we feel is just not all that great of a mechanic, what can we give you instead that makes you still excited to use the carrier and make you, feel better about the investment that you've made in the cap without having to rely on this mechanic that we don't like, and provides really frustrating gameplay for a lot of people.
Yeah, but I think you took a lot of strategy out of the game, because when you have a super or a carrier next to the POS, the other guys that enter the system, they don't have to fight you. So they can't escape like some of the dudes do. And when I'm on a roam, I'm scouting the system, I go in it, and I don't fight another fleet of 100 people when I'm just with my 10 or 20 dudes on it. So it's just a big thing of strategy you took out of the game, and EVE was within the last years, the decade of the years, a very good game where you can use a lot of strategies, and just interesting how you will fix it and make the capitals and the supers worth it to fly it, because I think here are some guys that have a lot of supers here, and at the moment you make them very useless at this time. So I hope you will.
I hear you. We're going to work on them, but I mean, we could probably have a long debate about what kind of strategy is valuable for the game. There are some that are and some that aren't. Like, obviously, I agree with you that just because someone would die if they jumped into a gate and there was 30 people and they tried to fight them, we shouldn't like make it so you can't have a fleet of 30 people. But I feel like this is a very different type of situation where even though it's a strategy that can potentially be avoided or anticipated, there's not enough value there to preserve the strategy existing, and so we'd rather replace it with something interesting that you like in the same way because it's deep and strategic, but that doesn't have the problems that this current mechanic does. Yeah, and I would encourage you to catch us in a roundtable or outside or something, and we can get some other questions, because I'm sure we could go all day about caps. But just know that we're going to try and work on it. We're going to try to make some improvements to this and related problems with caps and super caps as soon as we can, so that hopefully you feel better about where caps are going in general.
Okay, I just hope you don't run away.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I, like basically everyone else in this room, love capital kill mills. With your stated goal of increasing nullsec, mining, self-sufficiency, and all those things, have you looked at maybe giving the Rorqual a siege bonus to mining yield amount to get them out of the passes onto the belts where people like me can find them and shoot them?
Yes, I'd love to see that. It's something we've, this is one of those, yeah. This is one of those things that, like, of all the, I always feel really bad whenever we say we're going to do something and we don't get a chance to, like, follow through on it. And this is, like, the most glaring example from last year where we put a big picture of a Rorqual and an orc up on the screen and we're like, stuff's coming! And then it didn't.
Stuff came, it just wasn't that stuff.
Yes, yes. We gave you a pretty yellow skin for the Rorqual. Something, it's technically something. Yes, there definitely is more work that needs to be done with them. We have kind of ongoing ideas that we've been playing around with that combine things like mining bonuses and being able to be effective on grid with some extra defensive bonuses, because just giving it the mining bonuses probably won't make it all that, like, that may not be enough to push people out to use it. But if you could do something like, for instance, go into a siege mode where you actually, like, make yourself and mining ships around you invulnerable for a little while, but also they can't move and attack or anything, so that, like, you can lock yourself in place and call in friends. That kind of thing is something we like the idea of. So we'd like to see kind of moving it in more of those kind of directions where you're not only just mining on your own, but you're also supporting a fleet, and where you have the ability to say, I've got friends in, like, a station 6 jumps over, I can lock myself in place for 10 minutes and like press a panic button and my friends can come in and have a brawl to save me. We'd like to see something like that happen, but there's some tech work that we were waiting, like, that's hopefully going to help enable that. But yeah, those kind of things are the kind of directions we're thinking about right now with it.
Thank you.
Just a quick question about the new fitting. Does it apply actually to the ships that I have in my hangar right now, or do I have to rebuild it like in a ghost figure?
No, the idea is basically you can fit whatever ship you have. There were like yellow lines around the slots that you didn't own the module. You can build the fit, and if you own the stuff, you can press fit, and it will fit a ship.
Okay, so can you basically save it like a fitting and then just import it, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
2 small ones. Last year at Fanfest with the Rorqual, you said a possibility for it was to be like a mobile mining base.
Yes.
You can take out into the field so it can support it. So I really hope that could be a possibility to actually inspire people to take it out. As a miner myself, it would be better to actually have it out, but it's a huge loss. So right now it's actually better to have it in a pause.
Yep, we completely agree. Like you just answered to the earlier question, it's giving you the ability to do cool things on grid and also the ability to have kind of a reasonable amount of protection are what we'd love to see, because then people will be bringing them out and having exciting fights around them and just having awesome mining fleets with a gigantic capital ship like spewing out soot into the air as it chomps on asteroids. We'd love to see that.
You also very, very briefly mentioned last year that you if the player actually wants it, to make some modular, like the Tech 3 tactical destroyers, but modular industrial, to have a balance, to use that as a balance point for the industrial ships.
Yes, so there's an idea that's been bouncing around for a while that we've kind of liked, of building something like in the strategic cruiser kind of mold of Tech 3 ships, where you can mix and match subsystems, but for industrial ships, so that you'd be able to have a ship that you can decide like whether to have like an ore hold or a normal hold or a fleet hangar, and you can decide whether to give it a mining bonus or an ice mining bonus or a gas mining bonus, and decide like all bonuses, like fleet bonuses for mining, all these kind of things that you can do with other ships, mix and match them in an interesting way. It's just a question of kind of priorities, because it requires all the things that a new ship requires. Tech 3 ships require a lot of art, the old style of Tech 3 ships especially, where you have the different subsystem combinations. So it's something I think we'd still be definitely interested in doing someday. That seem, yeah.
I don't have much to add other than I know that Ytterbium's really interested in that idea as well, and yeah.
Yeah, it's been one that Ytterbium has been pushing for since before I arrived here. It's just, we basically decided to do the tactical destroyers instead. There's always a number of ideas for when we are introducing new ships. Hopefully someday, though.
I will give it 2 thumbs up if you release it, and maybe a kiss, depending on how drunk I am.
Awesome. Yes?
Hey guys, and just 2 very quick questions as well, if I may. One for Rise, probably something we can pick up on a roundtable session. But with regards to the Skynet nerf, obviously you're trying to bit of a balancing act there between people who really like it and yourselves who don't like that aspect.
Yeah.
Have you considered kind of like a limited flight time with then a specific refueling / downtime as kind of like a halfway house? Or otherwise, so you know, just an open question, which you don't have to answer now, but you know, food for thought.
Yeah. No, let me just quickly say, like, we did consider trying to force, rather than take the mechanic away, try to force risk on the mechanic. So rather than that, which just probably would make it less efficient, kind of handicap, maybe do something like make it so you can only do it if you're in some kind of cycle that exposes you so that you can then be caught. Okay. But it ended up sounding way more complicated, and we just kind of ended up moving in this direction instead.
Fair enough, fair call. And Fozzie, just one quick one for your Sharq, sorry. With regards to the fitting, based on the power grid and CPU, based on your skills, is it also taking into consideration anything you may have in terms of implants in your head at that time, or do you have to tell it that you've got those in there?
It will take implants into that.
Into consideration?
Into consideration that you have plugged in. You don't have like implant what's it called? Like simulation or booster simulation or any of that kind?
It will know specifically what you have.
It'll be using your character for everything as your character is now.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, so your skills you have now. And
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, hi guys.
Hi. Yo.
Hi. Well, I don't know if some forum or something covered this topic, but I got a question about module side. So you're redoing all the modules and actually removing removing all the meta items, but there are items in game that are actually they cost a lot in game, like say a meta 4 damage control unit or something like that. Or before the meta 4 light missile launchers. And in my case, I lost a lot of ISK on that because I had a lot of them and I knew they were going to change, but I didn't know that there wouldn't be any popular anymore. So what are your thoughts on that in the terms of items losing value?
Yep. So yeah, like we said, we're not removing the meta items, we're condensing them into a smaller number. In the case of things like the Arbalest launchers to the compacts, it isn't actually that the usage has gone down, it's that the supply has gone up. So because of the fact there's fewer types to drop, you're more likely to find them, and that's what's caused the value decrease. There's been some cases where we've done some special things to try to help out people's, to try to keep the kind of loss of value from being too dramatic. Like for instance, when we went through the micro auxiliary power cores, we converted all of the vigor cores, the metaphors, up into faction ones actually instead of the normal meta ones. I can't promise, I definitely can't say for sure we'll do that with any specific set. It's always something we have to kind of keep in mind. But with a change like this, there's always going to be winners and losers and kind of value of them. The most important priority is getting to a good place for afterwards. We'll do our best to try to smooth it out, though.
All right, well, thank you very much.